page Ois Vav, line 13. Excuse me. 1 second. So we were talking about the level of Ohr Ayn Sof Lamata Mata Din Tachlis, how the Ohr Ayn Sof reaches all the way to the lowest most level, and this level that it reaches so low is the even in our world, that even though our world is finite and it comes through tzimtzum and so on, despite being finite, despite coming through tzimtzum, still in all, it is a level of it's the Ohr Ayn Sof comes down and manifests down here as well. So now the Rebbe continues as far as the avoid of a person. One more minute. So Oisvav, line 13. Yes, we could add all of this is also, we must say, from the general idea of the service of a person, that we find in the service of a person the way the infinite expresses itself down here as well. It says, it's known the teaching of the Mezritcher Mag, how what Chazal say, it is greater the actions of tzaddikim than the actions of the heavens and the earth. So what does it mean that it's greater? In what way is it greater? Because what Hashem did, we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on, what Hashem did was create yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. What tzaddikim do is transform and return the yesh to a state of bittul. They transform the yesh back into ayin. So he says inside line 16, Ki ma'isa b'reishis hoysav yesh me'ayin, that the creation was something from nothing. The me'ayin liyesh, transition that went from a state of nothingness to a state of something. And tzaddikim transform and make from nothing into something, etc. Seemingly it's not understood that how is that so great when they turn the yesh into the ayin. The actions of tzaddikim that they make the yesh back into ayin, it only reaches and taps into the level of ayin. That is the place that to it reaches the service and the work of man. Because, as he's about to explain in the parentheses, because a level that's higher than it says, if you were righteous, if you did tzedakah, what have you given him? And if you have had many sins, what are you doing to him? In other words, that our avodah doesn't affect in a level that's beyond us. To such a degree that Chazal said, that there's a level that Hashem says, I do not know which of these I desire. Do I desire the the actions of tzaddikim or the opposite? In other words, because there's a level of godliness where we do not have this distinction, where we do not have this difference between the idea of good and bad, the way our avodah manifests good and bad. So therefore, if there's no such difference, so the level of ayin which the tzaddikim reach to is only such a level that is able to be impacted by what we're doing. So therefore, how is it possible to say that the actions of tzaddikim that only reaches the level of ayin are greater even than the actions of heavens and earth? Yesh me'ayin. That earlier in the Maimer, if you remember, we explained that to create something from nothing, that can only be Ohr Ayn Sof, can only be from the infinite light of Hashem. Since the light is similar to the luminary, which is the very essence of the emanator, top of page Chav Daled, that the Eibishter himself is from the Eibishter's being comes from his very self, and it's not a result of any cause that preceded him, heaven forbid. So therefore, the level of yesh can only come into being from Hashem's very essence, not the level of ayin. Ayin is still a level that has to do with Seder Ishtalshlos. Ayin is still something that relates to the yesh. But the Eibishter creating the yesh had to be, like we said before, since the yesh believes itself to be something from nothing, something coming out of nowhere, so therefore can only come from Hashem's very essence that truly doesn't come from anywhere. So he says, so therefore, how can we say that the actions of tzaddikim are greater? But based on what we explained before about how there's the power of the Ohr Ayn Sof down here, the Ohr Ayn Sof lamata mata adin tachlis. Based on that, we're going to be able to explain as well this concept that the Ohr Ayn Sof is also found, the Ohr Mein Amor is also found in the Avodah, not just in the multiplicity of the creations, not just in the fact that there was a creation, yesh ma'ayin, but also in the Avodah of the tzaddik. So he says, line 2, on page Chav Daled, who the idea behind this is, though the level that's beyond the place that over there a person's avodah reaches is in such a way that over there it's so high that darkness is like light, it's beyond any type of limitation. Like we said before, if you have done tzedakah, if you have done righteousness, what have you added to Hashem? And if you have sinned a lot, you have not taken away from him. Kol makim, despite that, yesh inyan naila v'amek yosef. There is an even elevated and deeper level, shenikra l'fa'amim pnimius hamakif, that sometimes it's called the inner part of the makif, va'ad la'atzmus and mohus, until Hashem's very essence, shesham hu chafetz b'masem tzadikim davkim. Over there, he desires the actions of tzaddikim specifically, the nimlach ben sheshem tzaddikim, and Hashem specifically consulted with the tzaddikim, meaning that because he saw the actions that tzaddikim would do, that tzaddikim would do such a great thing about doing Torah mitzvahs, that's what caused him to decide to create the world. So in other words, right away at the beginning of creation, we do see a connection with our actions. Because, like it says, that even though Esav Yaakov, even though Esav is a brother to Yaakov, still in all, the Oyev es Yaakov es Esav Sanes. I loved Yaakov and I hated Esav. So there's a place where it seems to be that good and bad, Yaakov and Esav, tzaddikim and the opposite of tzaddikim, seem to be equally something that is by choice. But on the other hand, despite that, we still find that there is, after all is said and done, there is the Eibishter's in his essence choosing the tzaddik. And this is what he's called, that's what he's calling the level of Pnimius HaMakif. Over there is the idea of choice that we say before Tkiyas Shofar, he chooses they chooses us, or for us, our inheritance, the pride of Yaakov that he loved always. It's a total level of complete freedom. In other words, he doesn't have any preconceived notions of good and bad, and despite that, he chooses good, and he chooses tzaddikim, and he chooses Yaakov, and he chooses the actions of tzaddikim. This idea of true freedom of choice, It's in such a place that there's no levels of revelations whatsoever. Because if there's already a revelation, so then that means that we are relating to the concept of light. Light relates to goodness. Clipper relates to darkness. So if you're dealing already with Giluyim, there's already a prejudice, if you will, towards good and towards positive actions and towards Torah mitzvahs and towards tzaddikim. So therefore, to be able to have true freedom of choice, it has to be beyond any levels of any type of Giluyim. Before we go on, let me just try to point out what he's trying to say over here. Normally, we speak about there's a level of Seder Ishtalshalos. There's the level of Seder Ishtalshalos that our actions have an effect over there. Then we speak about that there's higher than that, the Makif. The Makif, the transcendent level, is a level that is beyond division. It doesn't differentiate, doesn't make distinctions. Darkness is like light. Don't know if we choose between the actions of tzaddikim or the actions of the opposite. But then the Rebbe says there's something deeper, something that he calls sometimes it's referred to as pnimius hamakif, the inner part of the makif. The inner part of makif is such a level that's where Hashem's free choice, that there's nothing, if you will, that is forcing his hand, but it's completely free choice that Hashem chooses completely one over the other. And to be able to have free choice, it must be the level in Hashem's essence that's beyond any revelation. Because as soon as you have revelation, so then the choice is not completely free. There's already a certain type of revelation by its very nature shows that we want to have light, not darkness. Light that's Torah mitzvahs, light that's tzaddikim, light that's actions of tzaddikim. And the same thing from the fact that we say that Hashem, before he created anything, he consulted tzaddikim. What's it mean he consulted tzaddikim? He didn't sit a whole bunch of tzaddikim around a table and ask them what their opinion is. But Chassidus explains that Hashem saw what the tzaddikim would do, saw the actions of tzaddikim, and that caused the Eibishter to choose to create the world, which means all the revelations were there for the creation of the world. So before there was any revelations, before there was even a level of makif, there was already Hashem deciding based on the actions of tzaddikim that he was going to create the world. So we see that Hashem, in his true free choice, had a connection with the actions of tzaddikim. So now he's going to explain, bringing from Maimer the Rebbe Rashab, that this idea in the Ohr, that over there it has already a connection with this level of the Moir that transcends the positive and that transcends and has the true freedom of choice. Let's see line 16 on page Chavdal. Like it's understood also from the explanation of the Rebbe Rashab that was mentioned previously. Also on the level of Ohr. Ohr is the b'chinas ha'ayin shesham magas avodah sa'adam. That's the level of ayin that over there it reaches the level of the service and the person's avodah. There's already over there in that ayin there is something similar to the luminary itself. Until the level of the Eibishter's very essence. So therefore, from the level of Hashem's essence, that over there, there's the true Bechira Chavshus. There's a true freedom of choice that the Eibishter has. He has no prejudice towards one over the other, towards Tzaddikim over Rishoyim. And over there, Yidden are chosen as his pride and so on. So therefore, it's therefore the actions of tzaddikim are greater than the actions of the heavens and the earth. Since we reach the level of ayin, the way it's part of the true yesh. So in other words, even though ayin is more connected with oir and more connected with seder shtalshlus, but since we've been the whole time establishing that the oir is infinite and it has to do with the moir, so we have already the connection not just with the ayin, but we have to do with the yesh that precedes the ayin, the true yesh, the true existence, Atzmus himself, that becomes expressed through the oir because the oir is ein hamoir. Till the level of the capabilities. Beforehand, the Maimon we mentioned, there's the level of Yecholos Lahayir, the level in Oir that's not really light yet, but it's the capability to illuminate, and that level of capability to illuminate is really inseparable from Hashem's very essence. Actually, let's stop over here for a second. Let me open it up to questions because it's a little bit complex. Let's make sure we have this clear before we go on to the next piece. Any questions? Any questions again? Thought my sound was off. I couldn't hear anybody. Okay. So now the Rebbe is going to compare this idea also with the concept of Shabbos, that Shabbos has a connection with Hashem's very essence, and yet it comes down here into this world. The last line on page Chav Daled, that's also the idea. That's the general idea of Avodah, Nasa Inyan Shabbos. Just like we said, that the Avodah of Tzadikim reaches all the way to the Yesh HaAmiti, which is beyond Avodah. The same thing, through our Avodah, we reach the level of Shabbos, which is higher than Avodah. Where do we see this? We see this from the famous Maimer Chazal in the parentheses, top of page Chafei. Maimer Chazal, the Chazal say, Misha Tarach Bet of Shabbos, Yochel B'Shabbos, someone that put in effort and toil prior to Shabbos will eat on Shabbos, just like it means the physical sense, that the physical sense of that one can partake of Shabbos meals only after and as a result of prior to Shabbos putting in the work. So the same thing spiritually, it means that there's the idea of Shabbos, which is beyond work, but we tap into it through our work. So that's like first tapping into the ayin, but then the ayin and the oir connects with the ma'ir, with the yesh ha'amiti, with the level of Hashem's essence that is channeled through the oir. So he's going to translate it more in detail how we find this in Shabbos. What is the idea of Shabbos? Shinyani Menucha. It's the idea of rest. Chazal say, Menucha. What was the world lacking? It was lacking rest. But Shabbos Menucha. So Shabbos came, rest came about. And the Chazal derived this from what it says in the pasuk. It says in the pasuk that Hashem finished the work of Ma'aseh Bereishis on the seventh day. Though prior to that, it says at the end of the sixth day of creation, that it says that he finished the heavens and the earth and all of their hosts. So why does it repeat again and say on the seventh day that he finished? So he said that the Chazal say that the world was lacking something, that Hashem finished on the seventh day. What was it lacking? It was lacking the idea of rest, and that was something that the Eibusher created on the seventh day. So now the Rebbe is going to explain the spiritual idea of Shabbos and the spiritual idea of rest. It's known, the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that Hashem is called rest. Because by Hashem, it's not possible by him the idea of movement in the sense of changes, that there's no changes by Hashem, so therefore it's an idea of rest. Only in something that is in a state of movement can there be changes. Something, the state of rest is inherently a state of non-changing. Or the other way around, Something that's non-changing is inherently a state of rest. Because movement is only applicable in something that is involved and under the limitations of time and space. Because the idea of time are the changes of past, present, and future. That's the idea of time. So that's change. So what does makim, what does place have to do with changes? Says from this is also understood concerning place that's also connected with time, because the Rebbe always connects the two, and wherever and whatever is to be found in time is to be found in place as well, because they're intimately connected. So if time is subject to change, so place as well is something that has changes. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hu Ayn Sof, the Ein Netek Makom Lamakom V'Gam Ein Begeder Zman. Hashem is without end, and He doesn't move, and He doesn't become uprooted from one place to another place. And also, He's not in the category of time. Therefore, the Eibishter is called Menucha, like the Baal Shem Tov said. The Sham Habehiras Gadol, it seems to be a continuing quote of the Baal Shem Tov. Over there, by Hashem, the level of Menucha, the brightness is very great. And the Inyan Ba Shabbos Ba Menucha, what is the idea that the Chazal meant that when Shabbos came, rest came, Shalacher Gemar Asiyas Ma'aseh Bereishis, after the conclusion of the creation, Hivik Hashem Yisbarach Behirazu, Hashem shone and sparkled out this brightness, that's in the level of rest, the level of His essential state of rest, His essential being. He shone out this brightness, the chinas hamor, the level of the luminary, that from it comes down the entire chain descent of the creation. Only an impression of it, a mark of it, remains in the creation itself. So again, we find this effect of Shabbos that it affects in the creation. In other words, Hashem's very essence affects in the creation. And where does it manifest itself in the creation? So it goes on line 19. From this is awakened and aroused within the creations a will and a desire to become elevated to that level of rest, because that rest is manifest and Hashem sparkles it out and shines it out to us. So this evokes within us the desire to become part of His essential rest. This is also hinted in the words, though the simple meaning is that He finished and He concluded. But also, Chassidus explains, Vayichulu meloshen kiloyin v'tshuka. Vayichulu is also the word expiring and desiring, that the entire creation reached a level that they are expiring to, they are desiring, they are yearning to become part of this menucha that they are experiencing on Shabbos. They want to become one with Hashem. So this is essentially the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, with some inserts of the Rebbe to explain. When the Torah move on from this teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, it's understood that the idea of the rest on Shabbos is in Hashem's very essence. Because outside of Hashem's very essence, you cannot say a true idea of rest, because there are levels of changes, there are revelations, and so on. This is also what's explained on Marich Chassidus, top of page Chavav, that Shabbos is beyond time. Therefore, we say every single week, at the beginning of the week, we say today is the first day. How's today the first day? It's not the first day. It's been so many days since the beginning of creation. How can you call it the first day? But the reason is because every Shabbos, we're going to a place beyond time, and we're starting time anew. Because the day after Shabbos begins time anew. It begins again the first day of the creation. The idea of Shabbos is higher than time, even higher than the highest level that there is to be in time, which means in the highest levels of Seder Ishtalshus, rather, it's a level that is beyond that total. It's known, and before the idea of time, as we know it in our physical world, it's called the order of times. In other words, that order of time means that A precedes B. So even though it might not be time on a calendar or time on a clock, but it's still, Chachma, for example, has to precede Bina. Seichel has to precede Midas. Atzilus has to precede Biyah. So before there was time as we know it, there's the idea of the order of time, meaning that something precedes something else. And from the idea of Seder Zmanim, which is the idea of time in the spiritual realms, until it comes down here, time down here below, even higher than the idea of Seder Zmanim, the idea of drawing close to Hashem and pulling back. And similarly, something called mati v'loy mati, how a revelation reaches downward and then it pulls back again. This type of pulse or pumping or pulling back and forth, this is the similar to the give and take of time, to the cycle of time. It's the spiritual source of time. So we're saying that all of these levels, if not Seder Zmanim, then there's Ratzi V'Shuv. If there's not Ratzi V'Shuv, then there's Mati V'Loi Mati. All these different levels are more refined and more subtle ideas of time. That all of these things are to be found in the highest, most levels, even in the Ohr Ayn Sof. But the Menucha of Shabbos that Rebbe is saying is even higher than that. But he's saying, the Shabbos, the idea of the rest of Shabbos, Zman, higher than the general idea of time. Also, the way time is in the most highest way. That is the way it's in the array and revelation, even in the way of name, like we said before, that light and name is the same idea. So even the way it's just a level of name, over there's at least the source of the idea of time as we know it over here. But rather, Menucha is even higher than the source of time, higher even than time, the way it's in the most subtle way. But rather, Menucha, rest, the level of Shabbos is beyond that. Is in Hashem's very essence. And this level, the service of a person reaches, because we said before, the Shabbos by they close in Avodah, because the rest of Shabbos comes about through the general idea of Avodah. Like we said, someone who toils before Shabbos will eat on Shabbos. So we say that even though the Ma'aseh Tzadikim is to turn the Yesh into the Ayin, but still in all, they tap into the Menucha of Shabbos, just like we said before, that the one who eats on Erev Shabbos, one prepares on Erev Shabbos, reaches the level of Shabbos. Any questions?
Yeah. So how can you have an absolute Menucha if you have to do the Menucha?
So the doing is before and the Menucha is after. So it's Misha Tzarach be'erev Shabbos, Yoichal b'Shabbos. The one who did the Menucha, the one who did the Avodah on Erev Shabbos, taps into the Menucha, taps into the level of Atzmos that is on Shabbos. And this is really part of the entire theme of the Maimer that he's talking about. Ohr Ayn Sof lamata mata din tachlis. Even down here, even in our world, even in our Shabbos, even in our situation, we have these revelations that are beyond, that have nothing to do with time, have nothing to do, and are beyond Avodah, but we still tap into it through our Avodah.
Is a similar thing true with holidays?
I don't think it's on that level.